Hey everyone, welcome back to more Reddit stories. In this malicious compliance slash pro revenge tale, I clear my parents' $480,000 mortgage, and their way of saying thank you was a lawsuit demanding half of my eight-figure company for my sister, based on a contract I never actually signed. They assumed I'd quietly settle and hand over millions, but instead I brought in a forensic expert and got the ultimate payback. The first story was originally posted on our the asshole, but it also carries strong revenge and malicious compliance energy. It's titled, I paid off a $480,000 mortgage for my entitled narcissistic parents, but now they demand I give my company to my sister. So, I'm a 32-year-old guy who owns a logistics and software company. I built this thing entirely from scratch, starting in my college dorm room with a laptop missing the E key and a server I assembled from leftover parts. I skipped parties. I gave up dating and sleep. I survived on instant noodles for 3 straight years, so I could funnel every last dollar back into the infrastructure and the team. It all paid off, though. The company is now valued in the 8 figures, and we manage logistics for several major regional carriers. My family dynamic has always been unbalanced, to put it gently. I have an older sister. Let's call her Evelyn. Evelyn is the golden child. She can do absolutely nothing wrong. If she failed a test, it was the teacher's fault for making the questions too difficult. If she got fired, the boss was just jealous of her personality. If Evelyn wrecked her car, the road was too slippery or the other driver appeared out of nowhere. Me, on the other hand, if I got an A-, I simply wasn't trying hard enough. If I won a state-level coding award, I probably just got lucky or the competition wasn't strong enough. You already get the picture. Despite all of that, I always found myself craving their approval. It's honestly a kind of sickness. I genuinely believe that if I became successful enough, if I earned enough money, they would finally see me the way they saw Evelyn. 2 years ago, my parents were complaining about their finances on every single phone call. Apparently, they had refinanced their house multiple times over the previous decade to fund Evelyn's various business ventures, including a dog walking app that didn't actually have an app, a dropshipping business that sold defective products, and a jewelry line that turned everyone's skin green. They were essentially drowning in debt and on the verge of foreclosure. The remaining mortgage balance was roughly $480,000. It was a massive sum of money, but I could handle it without seriously damaging my own finances. I wanted to do something meaningful. I wanted to save the family home where I grew up, and I wanted them to finally say, wow, thank you, son. We're proud of you. So I wired the funds. I paid off the entire mortgage in a single transaction, directly to the bank. There were tears. My mom hugged me harder than she ever had before. My dad actually shook my hand, looked me in the eye, and patted me on the back. For about 3 weeks, it genuinely felt like I finally had a real family. I was on cloud 9. Then came the holiday dinner. I was invited over to celebrate their newfound financial freedom. I walked in, and the atmosphere was strangely formal. Evelyn was there, grinning like she'd just won something, dressed in a brand new designer outfit I'm fairly certain my parents had purchased for her. We sat down to eat, and halfway through the pot roast, my dad cleared his throat and pulled a piece of paper out from under his placemat. It wasn't typed. It was handwritten on what appeared to be a sheet torn from a standard yellow legal pad. He slid it across the table toward me. It was titled Family Support Agreement. The text was scrawled in blue ink. It stated that in exchange for the emotional support, housing, and guidance provided by my parents and my sister throughout my formative years, I, the undersigned, agreed to transfer 50% of the equity in my company to Evelyn. At the bottom was a signature. And yeah, it looked like mine. I stared at it. I looked at them and genuinely thought it was some kind of joke. I actually laughed and asked if this was a gag gift or a prank. But my dad didn't smile. He said, "We found this in a file cabinet. You signed it 3 years ago at Christmas. You were drunk and emotional. You said you wanted to make sure Evelyn was taken care of because she supported your dreams." I froze completely. There were 2 enormous problems with that story. First, I have never agreed to hand anyone equity in my company. My investors would be furious, and my operating agreement explicitly prohibits transferring shares without board approval. Second, and far more importantly, I literally cannot drink. I have a metabolic condition called LDH2 deficiency, sometimes referred to as Asian flush, though it can affect people of various ethnicities. It essentially means my body doesn't produce the enzyme needed to break down acetaldehyde. If I consume even a few sips of alcohol, I don't get drunk or feel good. Instead, I turn bright red, my heart rate shoots up to 140, I get a severe migraine, and I vomit immediately. It basically feels like getting the flu in an instant. I haven't touched a drop of alcohol since my 21st birthday, when I wound up in the emergency room, convinced I was having a heart attack. The notion that I was drunk at Christmas 3 years ago is physically impossible. I was sipping ginger ale that night. I remember it clearly. I told them all of this. I said, I didn't sign this. I cannot drink. This is a forgery. Evelyn immediately burst into tears, a performance that was clearly Oscar-worthy. She wailed about how I was trying to back out of my promise, how greedy I was, and how I didn't care about family. My mom joined in, claiming she personally remembered me signing it, and that I'd been drinking the special eggnog, which I wouldn't go near with a 10-foot pole because the smell alone makes me nauseous. They gave me two choices. I could honor the contract and transfer the shares quietly, or they would take me to court and expose me as the liar they claimed I was. They said the mortgage payment was a fine start, but it didn't make up for all the years I had ignored the family to build my business while Evelyn had been there for them. I stood up. I was trembling with rage. I told them never to contact me again. I said the house payment was a gift, but what they were doing now was extortion. I snapped a photo of the document with my phone before my dad snatched it back, and then I walked out. Since then, they've plastered their version of events all over social media. My aunts and uncles have been messaging me, calling me a thief and saying I took advantage of my parents' generosity and am now abandoning my sister with nothing. Honestly, I feel like I've stepped into the twilight zone. I paid nearly $500,000 to rescue their house, and now they want half my company based on a napkin-level contract I never signed. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for refusing to honor this contract, cutting off my parents after paying their mortgage, and threatening legal action if they don't stop harassing me? And yeah, guys, let me know what you think in the comments. I don't think anyone in their right mind could call Opie the asshole here. If anything, I'd say he's way too generous because these parents clearly don't deserve the treatment he's given them. They're obviously taking advantage of him. Either way, let's go through some comments and then the update to the story. So don't close the video just yet. Comment number 1, NTA, get a lawyer. This isn't just family drama. This is attempted fraud and extortion. If the company is worth 8 figures, 50% represents a life-altering amount of money, and they won't stop on their own. Forging your signature is a criminal act. You need to lock down your credit and business assets immediately. Comment number 2, NTA, but from a purely business standpoint, you need to be aggressive. Even a fabricated contract can cause real problems for a company. If investors catch wind of an ownership dispute, it creates a cloud on title over your shares. Get ahead of this now. Also, $480,000? You're a saint. I would have let them face foreclosure myself. Comment number 3, everyone sucks here for letting things get this far. You knew they were leeches. You paid the mortgage anyway, and in doing so, you taught them that you're essentially an ATM. Now you're surprised they're trying to make a bigger withdrawal? You're the asshole to yourself, man. And honestly, that's a fair point. Opie really is the asshole to himself for continuing to maintain contact with these entitled people. His life would undoubtedly be better without them in it. Either way, here's the update. And by the way, if you've watched this far, please don't forget to like the video and maybe drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from today. It genuinely helps with the YouTube algorithm. Thanks so much. So, it's been almost 2 years since I originally posted. Buckle up because this was a long, slow burn, but the outcome was absolutely worth the wait. I took the advice from the comments. I reached out to a high-end firm in the city that specializes in commercial litigation and fraud. When I showed my lawyer, Robert, the photo of the contract I'd snapped before walking out, he didn't laugh. He went very quiet, stared at it for a long moment, and said, they're actually going to try to enforce this blue ballpoint ink on legal paper. Sure enough, 3 weeks later, I was served with a lawsuit. My parents and sister had found an attorney who was either desperate or unethical enough to take the case on contingency. They were suing me for breach of contract and demanding specific performance, meaning the actual transfer of stock, plus damages for so-called emotional distress and loss of future income. The filing claimed the contract had been signed on December 25th for years prior, and alleged that I was intoxicated but lucid enough to understand the nature of the agreement. Robert laid out the strategy. We weren't simply going to defend ourselves. We were going to dismantle their case so completely that they would regret ever learning the word lawsuit. We started with the discovery phase. It's the boring part of legal dramas on TV, but it's where cases are truly won or lost. We requested the original version of the contract. They fought us for months, sending over photocopies and claiming the original was stored somewhere safe. Robert filed a motion to compel, and the judge ultimately ordered them to produce the original for inspection. Once we had the original document, we hired a forensic document examiner, not just someone who reads handwriting, but an expert who testifies in federal criminal cases. He used microscopes, infrared light, and indentation analysis. His report was devastating. First, he examined the paper itself. It appeared to be a standard yellow legal pad of the kind you'd find at any office supply store. However, the expert noticed something unusual about the ruling lines. He contacted the manufacturer of that specific brand, identifiable by the cardboard backing, which they'd foolishly left attached. The manufacturer had slightly altered the opacity of the blue ruling lines and the width of the left margin in early 2021 to reduce ink costs and improve standardization. The expert obtained an official affidavit from the paper company confirming that the specific line spacing design on that sheet was not in production in 2019, the year they claimed I had signed it. The paper literally did not exist at the time I allegedly signed it. Second, he analyzed the signature. It wasn't a tracing, it was a simulation, someone attempting to reproduce my signature freehand. He identified tremors in the strokes where the hand had hesitated, something that doesn't occur when a person signs their own name naturally. He also found microscopic indentations on the paper from where someone had practiced the signature on a sheet placed on top of the contract before signing the real one. Third, and this was the decisive blow, he compared the handwriting in the body of the contract to samples of my sister's writing obtained through discovery, old birthday cards, checks she had written to my parents, and so on. It was a match. Not a possible match. A high probability of common authorship match. The loops on the Y's and the way the T's were crossed were identical. We had them completely cornered, but Robert said, "Wait, let them hang themselves." And we moved on to depositions. A deposition is where you sit in a conference room with a court reporter and answer questions under oath. Lying is perjury, so we deposed Evelyn. She sat across from Robert, looking smug. He asked her calmly about the evening the contract was signed. "Walk me through the night," Robert said. Evelyn spun a detailed story. She described the fire in the fireplace. She described the eggnog. She explained how I was supposedly crying about how much I loved her and how she was the reason for my success. She claimed I grabbed a legal pad and wrote the contract myself because I wanted to be generous. "So you watch him write every single word?" Robert asked. "Yes," she said. "And he signed it in front of you?" "Yes." "And this took place on Christmas Day, 2019? "Absolutely. I remember it perfectly." Then we deposed my parents. They corroborated every detail. My dad even added a flourish, claiming he'd try to talk me out of it because it was too generous, but that I had insisted. They were all committed to the lie, and they had locked themselves into a story that was both physically and scientifically impossible. We filed for summary judgment, but the judge wanted to hear arguments, and we ended up in a hearing on the validity of the contract. My parents arrived at court looking every bit the victims. My mom was wearing a worn-down coat. She owns fur, but left it at home. My dad was using a cane I had never once seen him use before. They were performing the role of poor, elderly parents being taken advantage of by their wealthy son. Their attorney gave a speech about the sanctity of family promises. Then it was our turn. Robert stood up and simply began presenting the evidence. He called the forensic expert to the stand and the expert projected the paper's microscopic line analysis on a screen. He explained the ink opacity change and read the affidavit from the paper manufacturer aloud. The color drained from my dad's face. Then the expert presented the handwriting analysis, overlaying Evelyn's writing samples against the contract text. It was an exact match. Then Robert played the video clips from the depositions in which all three of them swore under oath that I had written the document in 2019. Finally, Robert submitted my medical records regarding my LDH2 deficiency, establishing that if I had consumed the quantity of eggnog they described, I would have been in a hospital, not drafting contracts. "Counsel," the judge said, addressing my parents' attorney, "are you aware of the origin of this document?" The lawyer looked as though he might be sick. He began stuttering, insisting he had relied entirely on his client's statements and had no knowledge of any forgery. He actually requested a recess to consult with his clients. The judge denied it. She then turned to look directly at my parents and Evelyn. "You have entered my courtroom, filed a lawsuit based on a document that did not exist on the date you claim it was signed, and lied under oath during depositions. This is a fraud on the court." She stated on the record that the court found the plaintiff's testimony to be demonstrably false and malicious, and she didn't simply dismiss the case with prejudice. She issued judicial sanctions against them and directed the court clerk to forward the complete transcript and evidence file to the district attorney's fraud unit. She looked straight at my parents and said, "You used this court as a weapon for your fraud. Now you will answer for it." Evelyn started screaming. Not crying, screaming. She shouted, "It was his idea. Dad told me to rewrite it. He said Opie has too much money and he owes us." She threw my father directly under the bus in open court. It was extraordinary. My dad started yelling at her to be quiet. The bailiff had to intervene and physically separate them. But I wasn't finished. I had a countersuit. When I paid off the mortgage, I hadn't just handed them cash. I'd paid the bank directly. In the countersuit, we argued that the payment had been made under the reasonable assumption of a continuing familial relationship, which they had fraudulently exploited. More critically, we sued for our legal fees. Because the contract was ruled a fraud and the lawsuit was deemed malicious, the judge awarded me 100% of my legal costs. And those legal bills were enormous. The expert witnesses, the hours, the depositions. It all totaled over $140,000. My parents didn't have $140,000. What they did have, however, was a mortgage-free house, and we filed a judgment lien against it. As for the criminal side of things, the district attorney actually took the case. Family disputes don't typically result in criminal charges, but given the amount of money involved, 50% of my company, this qualified as a major financial crime. Plus, they had all perjured themselves on the record. Evelyn broke almost immediately in police custody. She confessed to everything. She admitted that my dad had conceived the plan because he was furious that I hadn't also bought him a new car when I paid off the house. They believed I would be too afraid of a public courtroom battle to fight back. They thought I would settle to keep things quiet. Because Evelyn was the one who had actually forged the document, she took the hardest hit. She was charged with forgery in the first degree and attempted grand larceny. My parents were charged with conspiracy and perjury. They ultimately accepted a plea deal to avoid prison time, given their age. They received substantial fines and 5 years of probation. But to cover the fines and satisfy my legal judgment, they had to sell the house, the very house I had paid off for them. After the fines, their own attorney fees, and repaying me, they walked away with almost nothing. They now live in a one-bedroom apartment in a far less desirable part of town. Evelyn wasn't as fortunate. It came out during the investigation that she had a prior record for check fraud, something I hadn't known until then. Apparently, my parents had covered it up years earlier. The prosecutor played hardball. She was sentenced to 3 years in state prison. I was in the courtroom when the sentence was handed down. She looked at me and pleaded, "I'm your sister. Do something." I just looked back at her and said nothing. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I felt relief. The leash had finally been removed. The fallout has been significant. The extended family members who call me a thief have gone completely silent. One aunt attempted to reach out last week to bridge the gap. I had my lawyer send her a cease and desist letter stating that any further contact would be treated as harassment. I have now blocked every single relative. I changed my phone number. I moved to a new home with a security gate. The most satisfying part of the malicious compliance came from their own demands. They wanted the contract enforced, the contract that stated they were owed compensation for their so-called guidance. Well, the legal system guided them straight into a cell and into poverty. They wanted me to treat them like business partners. Fine. Business partners who commit fraud get prosecuted. I treated them exactly the way I would treat any stranger who attempted to steal my company. And through all of this, I came to understand something. I was paying for a fantasy. I had handed over $480,000 in exchange for parents who loved me. But you cannot purchase that. The moment I stopped paying, the love evaporated. I'm focusing on my company and my own mental health now. I have a great therapist who is helping me work through 30 years of narcissistic abuse. So to answer the original question, no, I'm not the asshole, in my opinion. I'm a person who paid off their house and then took it back when they tried to stab me in the back. Justice was served. Comment number 1. You are the asshole. And I say this as someone who has literally never commented in this subreddit before. You financially destroyed your own blood family and sent your sister to prison. Do you have any idea what that's going to mean for your parents in their old age? They had to sell the house you grew up in because of your actions. Sure, they tried to forge a document, but so what? Family is family. You think a piece of paper matters more than the people who raised you? Evelyn is your sister. She made a mistake, yes, but 3 years in state prison for a nonviolent offense? You could have settled out of court, given them a couple of $1 million, and everyone would have moved on. But no, you had to handle everything like a cold corporate machine. And let's address that $480,000 mortgage payment. You knew they were struggling, and you threw $500,000 at them without any conditions. What exactly did you expect? That they would suddenly start respecting you? That's not how narcissistic parents operate. You played yourself. Also, the fact that you're bragging about sending a cease and desist to your own aunt, you're isolating yourself from your entire family because you want a lawsuit. Is that really winning? You have money, but you have no one. That's not a victory. That's just being wealthy and lonely. And 3 years later, you're still in therapy? Get over it. Not everyone comes from a perfect family. I cut off my dad after he called me a failure at Christmas, and you don't see me running to a therapist about it. Grow up. Comment number 2. Not the asshole. Not even remotely close. I'd give you a platinum award if I weren't currently eating rice and beans for the 3rd meal in a row. That said, I need to address something. I keep seeing people call you cold or ruthless for not just letting it go or being the bigger person. To those people, respectfully, go think again. This was not your typical family drama, where someone said something hurtful at a holiday dinner. This was a coordinated criminal conspiracy to steal half of someone's company using a forged document. The contract had the legal standing of a scribble on a napkin, and yet they still sued you, deposed you, and threatened to publicly destroy you. They went for the throat. They wanted to ruin you, and were supposed to feel bad that they got it back. The detail about the paper, by the way, I actually gasped out loud at work. The fact that the paper itself was proof of forgery because those ruling lines didn't exist in 2019. That's the kind of forensic evidence they use in law school textbooks. Your lawyer absolutely dismantled them. The only part that saddens me is that you had to go through any of this at all. Nobody should have to sue their own family, let alone compile forensic evidence proving their sister forged a contract. You didn't ask for any of this. You just wanted your parents to be proud of you, and they try to rob you blind instead. The best part of this entire saga is that they demanded the contract be enforced. And well, they got exactly what they asked for, just not in the way they imagined. They wanted the business world to take them seriously as legitimate parties with valid claims. The business world treated them like the fraudsters they were. They wanted you to honor family obligations. The legal system honored those obligations by holding them accountable for their conduct. You didn't destroy your family. They destroyed themselves. The moment they chose to forge a document and extort you, the outcome was set. You simply made sure they were held responsible for it. Also, moving to a gated home with a new number and full no contact, that's exactly the right move. No loose ends, no second chances. You don't owe them anything. Not a second chance, not a phone call, not so much as a second thought. Complete and total indifference. That's the ultimate victory. Go enjoy some fresh air. Enjoy your successful company. And find people who actually deserve your love and loyalty. You've more than earned it. Comment number 3. Everyone sucks here. Your parents and Evelyn are obviously sociopathic criminals, forging a contract on paper that didn't even exist, yet is straight out of a bargain bin cartoon villain's playbook. They absolutely deserve the one-bedroom apartment and the probation. But OP, you suck too, specifically for the whole "I crave their approval" pattern. You spent $480,000 essentially trying to purchase their love, which in effect subsidized their ability to hire a lawyer to come after you. You funded your own near downfall. And while I acknowledge that they committed serious fraud, hearing you describe the payout being worth the wait and watching you stare blankly as your sister begs for help is genuinely unsettling. Your family is a toxic waste dump, and instead of simply walking away, you chose to become the biggest toxic spill of all. The whole story is just a collection of wealthy or aspiring to be wealthy people making each other miserable. And yeah, let me know in the comments what you think about this story and whether you believe Opie was the asshole or not. The next one is a fantastic petty revenge and malicious compliance story titled, "My boss insisted we cut out the middleman to save 15%, so I let him handle the logistics of a 40-foot container." I work as a purchasing manager for a mid-sized home goods retailer. We've used the same domestic importer for our seasonal decor for 5 years. They charge a markup, but they handle customs, quality control, and shipping. It's completely hassle-free. My new director of operations, however, is convinced he's a business genius. He called a meeting last month and lectured me on how we were hemorrhaging money by using a local distributor. He told me to cancel our contract for the holiday shipment and go directly to the source. I warned him. I explained that managing freight forwarders, tariffs, and port delays is essentially a full-time job. He told me I was just being lazy, and he actually said, "Just give me the contacts. I'll close the deal myself." So I did. I spent a few days on Alibaba compiling a list of legitimate Chinese manufacturers that produce glass ornaments. I handed him a spreadsheet with 20 factory contacts, their MOQ requirements, and the relevant time zone differences. Then I sat back and watched. He discovered that the FOB price doesn't include delivery to our warehouse. He wired funds to a supplier but forgot to hire a customs broker, so the shipment got flagged by CBP. The container sat at the port for 10 days because he had no idea what an ISF filing was. The demurrage fees alone, the fines for not moving the container, cost more than the 15% he had been trying to save. He came to my desk yesterday looking remarkably humbled and asked if I still had the phone number for our old importer. And the final one is a petty revenge story titled, "Won't give me $20 off? Fine, I'll get $50 off instead." For context, I'm 15 and I run a small lawn mowing business in my neighborhood. I've been saving up to replace my current 16-plus year old mower. I went to the only Home Depot in my city that had a $750 Honda mower in stock. I found an associate and tried to buy the floor model, but since they had one in the back, I couldn't purchase the display unit. Fair enough. I pulled up a competitor's website, Northern Tools, and showed a different associate that I could get $20 off there with a coupon, with the other store less than 5 minutes away. They checked with who I believe was the department manager, and it was approved. So I made my way to the registers and explained the situation to the cashier, who then called over her supervisor. Enter Karen, haircut and all. Me, I was told by that associate that I could get $20 off because a competitor has it at a better price. Karen, in a tone that was equal parts mocking and patronizing, "No, that's a coupon. It has to be the actual listed price of the item. They don't know what they're talking about. I'm the financial supervisor. For the record, their own website states they accept competitor coupons." Me, "Okay, then I'll just go put it back." So I did and headed out to the car. On my way out, she dropped her head, made that exaggerated sympathetic face, and said, "I'm sorry you couldn't save money." I was tempted to flip her off. Instead, I thought, she's not actually a manager. Let me go speak to customer service. So I walked to the service desk. Here's how the conversation went. Me, hey, I was trying to get $20 off a $750 mower. Two associates told me it was fine, but then the supervisor over there said absolutely not. Customer service rep, okay, let me take a look at that mower. He went, looked at it, came back, and rang me up. We had a nice conversation about cars. I walked out of the store with $50 off. Karen didn't say a single word. And yeah, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.